The Windswept Depths of Pandemonium. It is the plane of chaos tinged by evil. There are no creatures native to this plane, no demons that will kill you, no devils that will trick you, no daemons that will enslave you, and no demodans that will torture you. The inhabitants that are here are mostly exiles, and they tend to keep to themselves and won't approach you. It is the least inhabited plane in the multiverse, so it must be pretty safe, right? Well, maybe, depending on what you consider safe. But Pandemonium is the worst place to be in all the Great Wheel. Sure, the plane of fire and the energy planes will kill you the second you step through a gate, but at least there's no pain or fear. It's an instant, sudden death. But on Pandemonium, you will live, but you will live in madness, and you will never be the same. Pandemonium is the chaotic evil, chaotic neutral plane, located between the chaotic evil abyss and the chaotic neutral limbo. It is an underground realm, one giant, infinite mass of rock with uncountable tunnels and caverns carved throughout it by its howling winds. Pandemonium has 4 layers. Pandesmos, where streams branch off the river Styx and flow through its tunnels. Cocytus, where the wind blows through narrower tunnels that cause it to shriek in a shrill tone. Phlegethon, where the walls absorb light and heat and water drips and creates interesting rock formations. And Agathion, a realm of isolated air pockets where the gods keep wonderful treasures and horrible secrets. The word Pandemonium means uproar and commotion. It is named this because the winds of the plane never cease, forever howling, shrieking, and echoing throughout its passages. Gravity on this plane is always away from the center of the tunnels, so one can walk on the walls and ceiling as easily as one could walk on the floor. The exception to this is Phlegethon, the 3rd layer, where gravity works normally. The main hazards of this plane are deafness, madness, and blindness. See, a chilly wind ceaselessly blows through the dark passages of Pandemonium. It never stops and is extremely loud, making it difficult to hear others and inflicting deafness within minutes. Sure, there are spots where it's quieter or where people have built structures to shelter from the wind, but even there it is still a low, nerve-wracking moan that never ends. And for every one of those, there's a dozen spots where the wind blows with the force of a hurricane or worse. Unlike the prime material plane, the wind doesn't follow any known rules of physics. The size of the tunnel does not affect how strong it is, and its power and speed change completely at random. Not only is the wind noisy, but it's also maddening. It never stops. Even in sheltered off areas, there is always a little noise, always a slight breeze. Talking is difficult or impossible. Your hair is always getting caught in your face, your clothes are always flapping, every spell component, tool, paper, or anything you take out has a chance of flying away. It is aggravating and it never stops. Eventually, this will drive even the most stoic of monks insane. There is also no natural light to be found anywhere on the plane. Flames will be immediately extinguished by the winds unless tightly sealed off, but even the most well-made lanterns can't function in the extremely windy areas. Magical light works, but still runs into problems on the 3rd layer Phlegethon. Not to mention, in a place that's always dark and most creatures here can see in it, walking with a bright light paints a target on your back. Infravision is also less helpful, as the cold walls absorb and dissipate heat quickly, making them dim and difficult to see even with dark vision. Not to mention the petitioners of the plane emit no heat, making them completely invisible to those relying on their innate night vision. Travel is even more complicated due to the water. Most every tunnel has a stream of foul water flowing through it. These can range from a small trickle to a raging torrent, and due to the gravity of the plane, they can corkscrew around the passage. Since gravity pulls from all directions, occasionally a stream will get diverted and will hit a perfect gravity counterbalance, allowing it to flow through the air in the exact center of a passage. If the current is strong enough, the oily water can splash and spray onto the walls, making them slippery. Additionally, you never know if one of these streams is a tributary from the river Styx. There are places of drinkable non-Styx water on the upper layers that the inhabitants naturally crowd around, but some newcomers will accidentally drink from the Styx when they're thirsty. Since it wipes their memory, they have no idea it's happening, so they wander Pandemonium constantly wiping their memory with no idea of what's going on. This description is consistent throughout all the editions of D&D that I could find. The main difference is that in 4th edition, while it does have a similar description, it has no layers. Agathion is mentioned, but it is described as a region of the plane instead of a specific layer, and then the other 3 layers are never mentioned. Traveling. First, let's discuss traveling to and from Pandemonium to the other planes. Like all outer planes, portals connecting this plane to its neighboring planes, that is, the Abyss, Limbo, and the Outlands, are located on the first layer, Pandesmos. They always take the form of flat squares on the sides of caverns. Yellow squares usually lead to Limbo, red the Abyss, and black to Concordant Opposition. However, being a chaotic plane, this is not guaranteed. There is a 20% chance for each traveler that they are instead transported to one of the other 2 planes instead. These portals are usually unguarded, as the denizens have no interest in fighting over possession of them. They have their own realms, and that's all they care about. In 3rd edition, you could also find portals to the elemental plane of air, but instead of colored squares, they were just regular tunnels. Traveling between layers. The barriers between layers are unmarked, but can be identified by the wind passing from one layer to the other. I didn't really get any detail on how exactly you can tell. I know the winds of Cocytus tend to be shriller and sound like people wailing, so I guess if you hear that on Pandesmos or Phlegethon, you know that leads to Cocytus, but in terms of the other 3 layers, I don't really know how you tell. The river Styx. Like all lower planes, the river Styx flows through Pandemonium. It is less dangerous here than the other lower planes, as it is less steeped in evil, making the waters less dark and oily. Just touching it doesn't wipe your memory like it does elsewhere. However, swallowing any does. In 2nd edition, this would be a saving throw versus spell, or you would forget your entire past life, including spells, class abilities, and alignment, and succeeding the saving throw would still cause you to forget the past day. Parts of the Styx run deep and fast enough to sweep someone up in its current, whisking them away to a completely random lower plane. In most of the lower planes, the Styx only runs through the top layer of the plane. In Pandemonium, it's very unclear if this is the case or if it runs through the other layers. It never specifies anywhere in Planes of Chaos which one's the case. However, it does mention that all of Pandemonium has streams of water running through it, and that any one of these could be a tributary of the Styx. So I think it's safe to assume that at the very least, tributaries of the Styx do run through all 4 layers. In 4th edition, they don't use the Great Wheel cosmology, so instead of it being located between the Abyss and Limbo, it just floats somewhere in the Astral Sea, so getting to and from Pandemonium is a little different. In 4th edition, arriving to Pandemonium through the Astral, one would first see roiling magenta clouds and feel the wind picking up, getting louder and stronger. Eventually, they will be blasted by sudden turbulence, and find themselves on the floor of a great cavern. The plane is surrounded by an endless black hurricane, and in order to leave, one must find one of many black rifts on the cavern walls located on the edges of the plane, then fly through whilst battling the strong winds. Properties. There are a lot of properties in Pandemonium that will affect anyone traveling there. First, let's start with the physical properties of the plane. The winds of Pandemonium never cease, and they are very loud. Every noise, word, or scream is caught by the winds of the plane and flung through all the layers. You can only communicate by shouting, and in every edition except 4th, this only works within 10 feet. Any further than 10 feet and even shouting will not be heard. Even within this 10 feet, in 5th edition, you have disadvantage on perception checks that rely on hearing. This also goes for spells that rely on sound reaching the target, such as Holy Word, the Power Words, and Shout in 1st edition, and spells that rely on sonic energy in 3rd edition. In 2nd edition, sound-based spells could work past 10 feet, but they had a chance of not working, which was equal to double the chance of a spell miscast, which we'll discuss in a second. The winds will also make you deaf eventually. In 1st edition, you would go temporarily deaf after 1 minute of exposure, and then permanently deaf after 10 minutes of exposure. In 3rd edition, it was similar, going temporarily deaf after 1d10 rounds, and these would end after spending 1 hour outside of the winds, and then permanently deafened after 24 hours. In 2nd edition, this deafness acted as the spell, requiring a saving throw versus spell. 2nd edition doesn't state how often to roll for this, so I guess it would just be up to the DM's discretion. In addition to making you deaf, it would also inflict a -1 to surprise rolls, although the DM may raise this for louder areas, and a 20% miscast chance on spells with verbal components. Since you can't hear yourself, it's harder to tell if you're saying the right thing. The wind is sometimes loud enough to even cause damage like a shout spell, inflicting 2d6 damage, although this may be increased for noisier areas. The winds also make managing material components difficult. In 2nd edition, when casting a spell with material components, the caster must succeed a dexterity check or the components are swept out of their hands and carried away, wasting the spell. Similarly, spells that produce cloud effects or flames are useless for the same reason. The winds howl constantly, but sometimes they pick up into strong windstorms. In 1st edition, these had a 10% chance every 100 minutes to occur, and could lift things and creatures that weighed up to 100 pounds in the air and carry it for 1d6 miles, dealing 4d6 fall damage upon landing. Native creatures are immune to this. In 3rd edition, these windstorms have a 10% chance of blowing per day in any given area, and they typically only last for 1 round, going on to other parts of the plane. When this happens, a random effect is determined by a table, but most of them involve dodging flying rocks or avoiding confusion or insanity. In 4th edition, the winds inflict a -5 penalty to perception checks, flying creatures treat every square as difficult terrain, thunder damage deals half damage, and zones of any kind cannot be sustained. In 3rd edition, it also had the mildly chaos-aligned trait where lawful characters suffer a -2 penalty to all charisma checks. Wind Madness. Now that we're done talking about the physical properties of Pandemonium, let's talk about the mental ones. The constant sound of harsh winds is ever present in Pandemonium. Loud, rushing air that literally never stops for all of time. This will drive even the most stoic monk into madness eventually. In 5th edition, characters must make a DC 10 Wisdom saving throw every hour spent in the winds. On a fail, the creature gains 1 level of exhaustion. When they reach 6 levels, instead of dying, they gain 1 random form of indefinite madness. Finishing a long rest does not remove levels of exhaustion unless they are away from the winds. This works exactly the same in 5th edition 24, except instead of going mad at 6 levels, it just caps exhaustion at 3 levels, and there is no madness condition. In 2nd edition, this madness mechanic is much more fleshed out. Player characters visiting Pandemonium must make a saving throw versus paralyzation periodically. The exact frequency of these saves is up to the Dungeon Master. Typically, it should be once a day, but particularly noisy regions might call for more, and quiet areas might call for less. Shelter also helps, so time spent in a building should be free of checks. Even though you can still hear the wind outside the building, the walls provide a sense of security. Although, while asleep, a person's subconscious is more vulnerable, so they may experience nightmares and be forced to roll a save while they sleep. Each failed save progresses the character 1 step along the 4-step path of Wind Madness. All denizens of Pandemonium are assumed to have succumbed to Stage 4 long ago. Barring wish or similar powerful magic, there is no cure, only relief from symptoms. If someone who progressed to Stage 2 leaves Pandemonium, all of their symptoms vanish, but if they ever return, they immediately revert back to Stage 2. The 4 stages are frustration, despair, hysteria, and resignation. So first up, frustration. In this stage, one will be annoyed by every little thing, constantly snapping at people and being impatient to move on with business. They won't want to plan and talk things out, they will want to get a move on. Frustrated characters suffer a -1 modifier to wisdom and intelligence scores while exposed to the wind's noise. Despair. During this phase, one feels completely hopeless. Nothing will stop the continual noise, so what's the point of fighting it? They won't take initiative, they won't take part in planning and discussion, and if asked for an opinion, they will unenthusiastically agree to whatever is being said. In battle, however, they fight desperately, because the despair on the outside is just denial of inner turmoil. Deep inside, they are ready to crack and slip over the edge into hysteria, the 3rd phase. Despairing characters are automatically surprised in combat, but once they're able to attack, they gain a +1 bonus to both attack and damage rolls. The 3rd stage is hysteria. At this stage, the person is absolutely desperate to get away from Pandemonium's noise. When they first fail the save that progresses them to this phase, they immediately begin running around madly, screaming, threatening anyone in their way, pleading to the gods for mercy, and so on for a number of minutes equal to the amount by which the saving throw is missed. Eventually, they will collapse, completely exhausted, and they will rock back and forth, muttering with their hands pressed over their ears and their eyes tightly closed. They can be grabbed by the hand and led along, but no matter what, they will not open their eyes or uncover their ears. Obviously, they cannot fight, cast spells, or do much of anything. If taken to shelter, they snap out of hysteria and act the same as in stage 2, but if taken back to the noise, they immediately revert back into hysteria. Obviously, they will be reluctant to leave the shelter. The fourth and final stage of wind madness is resignation. At this point, the poor sod has come to terms with the constant howling and has accepted the wind as ultimately inescapable. They are able to mostly ignore the anguish it causes, but of course, ignoring the pain doesn't make it go away. It manifests somewhere else, a nervous tic, a phobia, a mania, or some other idiosyncrasy. The longer one has been stuck here, the more severe the quirk. Among the denizens of Pandemonium, these quirks serve as badges of honor that let a cutter know that they've been to the plane before and knows the dark of things here. To help DMs and players come up with ideas for their own quirks, the book gives a huge list of example quirks that I'll throw up on the screen. Now we have the magical properties of Pandemonium. In 2nd edition Planescape, every plane had unique effects on spellcasting, and Pandemonium is no exception. Keep in mind these only affected arcane casters and magic items. Divine casters that get their spells from gods, such as clerics, paladins, druids, and rangers, were not affected. Instead, they were treated as one level lower for each plane between their gods and Pandemonium. Being a plane on the chaos side of the ring, Pandemonium has the following changes to magic. Alteration. The chaos of the plane affects alteration spells by bleeding away their energy, shortening the duration as if the spellcaster was one level lower. Evil also leeches into the spells to make them look, smell, sound, and feel slightly foul. Conjuration. The Planes of Chaos box set, which is where 99% of the 2e information for Pandemonium is coming from, says this for conjuration magic on the plane. Quote, "These are largely dealt with in the Planescape box set. It's worth noting, however, that Find Familiar, Limited Wish, and Wish don't work on this plane." End quote. There's no explanation given as to why those spells don't work on the plane, and as you just saw, it says that most of this information is dealt with in the Planescape box set. So, when I go to the section on Pandemonium in the Planescape box set, it doesn't say anything about conjuration magic. Nothing at all. So, I'm guessing something happened in the editing room and they just forgot to put this in. I'm not really sure what's going on here. Divination. Pandemonium's dark and chaotic nature interferes with these spells. Whenever a divination spell is cast, the DM makes a secret saving throw versus paralyzation for the caster to represent a test of will to accurately read the spell's portents. If the save fails, they get misleading information. Necromancy. Since Pandemonium is in the lower planes, but just barely, there is a slight surplus of negative energy. Necromantic spells that generate life, such as Clone and Reincarnate, are more difficult here. The caster must pass an intelligence test, otherwise the spell is spent with no effect. Necromantic spells that deal damage or manipulate undead have no changes. Wild Magic. Wild Magic is enhanced here. Wild Magic spells are cast as if the caster was a level higher, and they have to roll twice for spell variation and apply the more extreme result. Elemental. Since Pandemonium is composed mostly of rock and wind, with a bit of water, earth, air, and water pseudo-elementals can be conjured with the right spell keys, but no spell key exists for fire elementals. Spell keys. Since Pandemonium's whole nature is wind howling through rock, its spell keys embody this. Whistles, flutes, and jugs carved from Pandemonium's stone are commonly used by holding it out to catch the wind. Utilizing different combinations, tones, and sequences act as the individual spell keys. The more grating and discordant, the better, but it needs to be loud enough to be heard over the howling of the plane itself. Bards sometimes come here to experiment with the linking of magic and music, but they always come away with an edge of madness to their art. Power keys. The powers of Pandemonium are stingy and distrusting, so they seldom give out power keys. When they do, it's most often for the spheres of charm to promote chaos, guardian to promote their most valued agents, or necromantic to promote evil. Inhabitants. Pandemonium is the least populated plane in the multiverse, and there are no intelligent races native to this plane in the same way that demons are to the Abyss or Sladi are to Limbo. Most creatures are here precisely because of this isolation. You have sneaky gods wishing to hide away from their enemies, such as Loki of the Norse pantheon. Then you have these spirits of primes who worshipped one of these low-lying powers. The Bleak Cabal faction take up residence here, and there's a decent amount of traffic from its neighboring planes, such as Tanari Raiders from the Abyss and the Slotting Gitzerai from Limbo. However, most inhabitants of Pandemonium are either immigrants, exiles, or marooned creatures from other planes. So let's go over all of these inhabitants. First, let's discuss the petitioners, the people who wound up here as their afterlife. While people who did not revere one god over another simply go to the realm that matches their alignment, so a chaotic evil person would go to the Abyss, neutral evil Hades, etc., the same is not true for Pandemonium. The only petitioners here are the ones who served a god who lives here. As discussed previously, all petitioners are inflicted with some degree of madness. It's almost never serious enough to prevent them from functioning, but it's always distracting and inconvenient to anyone dealing with them. They are also all invisible to infravision, as they give off no body heat. They possess a sense akin to a bat's sonar, allowing them to see up to 120 feet in pitch darkness or 30 feet in the windiest locales. All the petitioners' bodies have adapted to the wind. They are all bone skinny with sharp angular features and smooth hairless skin. They wear barely any clothing, and all of this ensures the wind glides smoothly against them, without finding anything to get caught on, meaning they aren't blown away as often as foreigners. They have unnaturally long clawed fingers and large feet with clawed toes and heels, allowing them to grab onto the plane's rocky walls when at risk of blowing away. Because the petitioners of Pandemonium are used to the maddening environment, they are immune to spells that cause any sort of madness or insanity, such as Delude, Tasha's uncontrollable hideous laughter, confusion, chaos, feeble mind, and Otto's irresistible dance. They also receive a saving throw versus spell to resist ESP. Fiends. As mentioned earlier, you can sometimes find demons on Pandemonium. Sometimes they're raiding for slaves or supplies, but other times they are exiled here. First edition says that Cocytus and shadow demons are abundantly common. The Bleak Cabal. The Bleak Cabal is a faction of Sigil, who believe the universe has no meaning and is simply madness. They believe everyone needs to find their own meaning from within themselves, but the only way to do this is to experience the intrinsic folly of the multiverse by embracing the madness around them. Makes sense they'd claim Pandemonium as their primary plane of influence. They can be found here embracing the maddening winds so that they can come out the other side and realize that even in insanity, there are still things they wish to accomplish. And those individual desires to accomplish something are the only meaning there is to existence. The Banished. Since Pandemonium is the most common place for exiled people to find themselves on, the second being Carcery, the people here are referred to as the Banished. They aren't a unified faction, just a convenient term to lump all of Pandemonium's inhabitants that don't fit any of the other groupings here. Related to the Banished are the Dispossessed. In addition to the Bleak Cabal, there's also a lesser-known faction called the Dispossessed that claim Pandemonium. They are essentially an extremist version of the Banished. See, the Banished tend to hold a grudge against the rest of creation for banishing them here, but the Dispossessed take this attitude to other planes, attempting to prove their worth against whatever the multiverse throws at them. They believe the rest of the planes have thrown them out, believing they are not important enough to play with the big rollers. The Dispossessed, also known as exiles or chippers, want to show the rest of the multiverse that they are wrong, and that they are a force to be reckoned with. They wander around the planes pissing people off and starting fights, and eventually getting revenge on whoever exiled them. Due to their hard-headedness, they gain a +1 to saving throws against mental attacks, and when rolling for HP, they roll twice and take the better roll. Outside their own sect, they take a -2 reaction penalty because of their antagonistic manner. There are many creatures native specifically to the River Styx in Pandemonium. Marinoloths and Hydroloths can of course be found in the Styx, but they stick to the wider, deeper waters, which aren't very common. Most of the presence of the Styx in the passages of Pandemonium are smaller streams, and these are inhabited by huge snails, slugs, and leeches, blind albino eels, lampreys, quippers, catfish, large pallid crayfish, and freshwater crabs. These tend to be larger than ones on the material plane, but few reach giant size. Howlers. Although the Book of Chaos and the Planes of Chaos box set says, quote, "But there aren't really any native races here to speak of, not like the Tanari of the Abyss or the Sladi of Limbo," end quote. The Monstrous supplement in the same box set does say that a beast called the Howler is native to Pandemonium. Howlers are large, four-legged beasts that occasionally get tamed and used as riding or pack animals by the denizens of the plane. They have scales covered by tangled red fur and a mane of sharp quills around their neck. Their front legs have long fingers crushed under their weight with claws, and their back feet are hooves. They stay away from the settled areas of the plains and smaller tunnels, sticking to the larger passages that can pass for plains or grasslands where they hunt in packs. Their canine-like howling that they do inflicts the same madness that the winds of Pandemonium do. In 2nd edition, you would roll the same save that you'd roll against the winds upon hearing their cry, although this could never bring you to stage 4 of Wind Madness as their howls weren't quite as strong. In 3rd edition, it only affected you after hearing their howl for 1 hour straight, and would deal 1 point of wisdom damage upon a failed DC 12 wisdom save. In 5th edition, you made a DC 16 wisdom saving throw or became frightened for 1 turn, and while frightened, your speed was halved and you were incapacitated. A successful save would make you immune for 24 hours, and this was an ability that they had on recharge. It also only worked in a cone shape, so even if you were standing 1 foot from the Howler, as long as you were to the side or behind, you were just somehow unaffected. Which doesn't really make any sense, because you would think anyone who hears it would be affected, but that was just one of those weird 5e simplification of rules things. Powers. There are several gods known to lair in Pandemonium. Gorelick of the Gnolls, Hrugek of the Bugbears, the Fairy Queen of Air and Darkness, Garrix of the Draconic Pantheon, Loki of the Norse, Tuonetar and Tuoni of Finnish mythology, Zeoboim of Dragonlance, Erithnul of Greyhawk, Dorinka of the Darrow, Homasubi of Japan, and Garagos, Cyric, Ibrandil, Talos, and Arl of the Forgotten Realms. According to 4th edition, no gods have divine realms here. Tharizdun used to have a realm here, being the one who created the plane, but he abandoned it shortly after to pursue the possibilities of the elemental chaos. Now, one thing that none of the lore addresses is communication. As I just mentioned, there are people here. Not a lot of people, but there are people here. And as you'll see later in the video, there are, albeit not many, a few towns, villages, and other gatherings here. However, everyone here has gone deaf a long time ago, so I'm wondering how they communicate. I mean, there are organizations such as the Bleak Cabal, not to mention inns and shops in a few places, so how are people talking and buying stuff? I assume that they use some form of sign language. Now, whether it's the same as the common sign language used on other worlds, a take on Drow sign language, or a completely new one invented solely in Pandemonium, perhaps based off the lower planar trade language used by many fiends, is anyone's guess. Either way, I'm just making all this up because the official lore never touches on it, but I just find it strange because this seems like a really important thing for them to just ignore, especially considering how much detail 2nd edition goes into other stuff. Now let's discuss the layers of Pandemonium. First up is Pandesmos, the topmost and most habitable layer of Pandemonium, where most of the inhabitants, realms, cities, and citadels of the plane are located. Out of all the layers, it has the largest caverns, some thousands of miles wide, and the calmest winds, and by calm I mean calm when compared to a major gale. Most of Pandesmos is a howling wasteland, but there are a few spots of habitation. The first location on Pandesmos is the Madhouse, a confusingly sprawling citadel maintained by the Bleak Cabal. It started off as a simple inn with stone walls to keep Pandemonium's noise out that acted as a meeting ground for travelers. More and more people began coming here to trade ore and gems, and new wings kept getting haphazardly added until eventually it got so big it circled around the entire circumference of the tunnel and met itself on the other side. The Madhouse acts as a giant caravanserai. Merchants come from all over to trade, but there are no natural resources or local craftsmen to make things. Some merchants arrive and quickly leave when they can't stand the noise. Buyers wander through with no rhyme or reason, and petitioners find fancy gems in the tunnels and people go crazy as they clamor to buy it. What's for sale and what's being bought changes rapidly, and prices are never consistent. You might come in one day and find amazing prices for magical swords, but no travel rations for sale. Then the next week, find a sale on lanterns, but no oil for them. Finding a place to stay is just as chaotic, as buildings change buyers frequently, so an inn might be a warehouse the next time you visit. The amount of people coming and going changes too, so one day there might be plenty of space, and the next there's no vacancy anywhere. Next up, we have Winter's Hall, also called the Hidden Realm and Winter Vault. Quote, "Wait in Father's strength, and your day will come. Trickery and treachery is fair play. Nurse your bitterness and drown your hate. That which does not kill you makes you strong. The eternal winter is coming." End quote. Winter's Hall is a secondary realm of Loki, the Norse god of trickery, that he uses to get away from the prying eyes of the Norse pantheon, which is why it is also called the Hidden Realm. Although on the very next line in the first edition manual of the planes, it then says that it can be spotted for miles, so I'm not really sure how hidden it is. However, it is on the least visited plane of the multiverse, so I guess that's good enough. He retreats here only when he has offended the other powers of Asgard, so he's never in a good mood here, and while he usually enjoys human company, he doesn't want it here. First edition says he comes here to plot and work on magic. The area around the hall is a snowy region of never-resting blizzards where visibility is limited to only a few feet. Wolfpacks stalk prey, and their howls are drowned out by the wind, meaning someone never even knows he's being hunted until the whole pack has ambushed him. Somewhere in the heart of the realm is a portal that skips over Limbo entirely and reaches somewhere in Jotunheim. The hall itself is described, in first edition, as a glittering palace of white crystal that pierces the darkness of the plane and illuminates 1,000 miles around itself. In second edition, it is a typical looking Norse hall, long, high, and sooty from its smoking hearths. Its interior walls are lined with sleeping alcoves, and the center has a double row of scarred tables. It has many pillars, all with weapons leaning against them. A large root of the world ash Yggdrasil forms the center supporting beam of the roof of Winter's Hall. It acts as a gathering place for warriors and their various hounds and winter wolves. The giant warriors are either boasting about past achievements, or if during a feast, drinking stolen mead and kicking dogs while servants are forced to dance in the lit fireplace. Anyone who comes here who doesn't hate the Norse or isn't a good liar is branded a spy for Aesir and subjected to torturous games like pin the pike through the clueless, hearth fire dancing, boulder bowling, or crack the armor. The nature of Loki's realm increases all rogue abilities by plus 10% for every bard or thief. Anyone that can slip the giants deserves their freedom. Anything stolen is fairly taken. Failure draws attention, and they better give their captors a laugh or an impressive tale to save themselves. All dogs, wolves, and canines entering the hall become servants of the Mistress of the Hunt, a frost giant who leads most of the hunts. They don't want to leave and are charmed to obey the giants of the hall and live here with them. Some of the petitioners here are Loki's followers, but most were captured by giants during raids from Jotunheim into Asgard, Vanaheim, or Nidavellir. They're mostly human, but there are also elves and dwarves. Services here are limited to rough food and rougher entertainment. The warriors here will also hire themselves out for gold, glory, or the joy of leaving Pandemonium for a little while. According to the 2nd edition Planescape book On Hallowed Ground, this was Arl the Frost Maiden's realm as well, but Planes of Chaos, which where most of this information's coming from, doesn't mention this at all for some reason. In 4th edition, which uses the World Axis cosmology, Winter's Hall is not located in Pandemonium, but in the Deep Wilds instead. In this version, it is only Arl's realm, with no mention of Loki, and it is a giant palace of ice floating over the Deep Wilds, with wings and towers jutting out in all directions, making it resemble an ice crystal. The last location we'll talk about on Pandesmos is the Towers of Ruin, also called the Screaming Towers and the Towers at the Heart of the Winds because it is eternally surrounded by howling winds. It is the divine realm of Talos, the Faerunian god of storms and general destruction. I couldn't find any more information about this realm though. Cocytus, the Lair of Lamentation, the second layer of Pandemonium. The tunnels here are smaller and twistier, causing the winds blowing through to whistle at a shriller tone than on Pandesmos. They sound like the constant wailing of mourners that could put a banshee to shame. This has given Cocytus the nickname the Lair of Lamentation. The cries are so horrific that in 1st edition, those exposed to it for one turn must save versus spell or be insane for 10d10 turns. The tunnels of this lair bear marks that indicate they were intentionally chiseled this way, possibly to ensure the wind sounds the way it does. They have been this way for as long as anybody remembers, and even the governors have no idea who or what carved them. The whole place is utterly depressing, and so almost no one comes here. The first location we'll talk about on Cocytus is Howler's Crag. They say that you can talk to anyone here, living or dead, mad or sane. They say if you shout the name of your home and sigil loud enough to drown out the noise of the wind, the crag transports you there. Howler's Crag is built on top of the grave of a god of travelers, portals, and planeswalkers who once ruled the planes. It was a phoenix who controlled the secrets of reincarnation. The other gods became jealous of this nameless one and cast it into Pandemonium and destroyed its followers and petitioners. When it died, it became the Crag, and the remnants of its divinity imbued the stone with magic. They say it attracts barmies, werebeasts, and outlaws the way honey attracts flies. Years ago, an order of mystics called the Brotherhood of the Phoenix took up residence in the burrows. Most believe they've died out, but others think they are still digging below it to recover the Phoenix's power, and others say their ghosts haunt the burrows. The crag is a jumbled mess of stones, boulders, and carved portions sticking out like a jagged spike. The top is a mostly level platform 8 feet in diameter with a low wall around it. The top part always glows with bluish fairy fire, making anyone standing there a prime target for their enemies. The lower reaches are riddled with burrows, each with a stone bench, 3 small niches or shelves, and a small altar. Many of these cells have their walls covered in alphabets, psalms, liturgies, and numerals. Most are indecipherable, and others are somehow related to the unnamed Phoenix god. The truth is, the crag won't teleport anybody no matter how loud they yell. However, whatever they yell is heard by the intended recipient, no matter where they are in the multiverse. Only one person can be contacted at a time, and sometimes messages go to the wrong place. Just like most things in Pandemonium, it isn't dependable. Near the crag is an inn called the Laughing Mug. Carved into the stone ground itself to be secured from the wind, the stairs down are marked by a single bright yellow lantern with a rusty iron door at the bottom. It's one of the only places in Cocytus where, quote, a rich cutter can buy a thick cloak and a cup of brandy, end quote. Next up, we have the Harmonica. The plains tunnels are apparently natural, but the tunnels of Cocytus seem to have been intentionally chiseled by long extinct species. The winds have smoothed these over, giving them a more natural look, and allowing people to forget about the eerie thought that something carved thousands of miles of tunnels for some unknown purpose. However, there is one section of Cocytus where the art cannot be ignored. The Harmonica is a huge, spherical cavern 10 miles in diameter, filled with hundreds upon hundreds of columns. The columns each have stairways that spiral up them. However, the steps are each waist high for an average human. This, combined with the fact that the columns are miles high, makes them exhausting. Adding to this, the columns are lined with holes that allow the wind to blow through, potentially knocking one off. At the bottom of these columns, the wind blows at a frequency so low a human cannot hear it, but they can feel the painful vibrations in their bones. As you climb up the columns, the noise rises discordantly, eventually reaching a tone so shrill that they shatter glass and make one's brain feel as if it is on fire. The powerful winds make it almost impossible to cast any spell with somatic or material components. Few make it to the top of a column before stopping, but those that have realize that most of the columns stop partway before ever reaching the top. But the vastness and lack of light make this impossible to tell without climbing all the way up and wasting your time and energy. The sphere is dotted with tunnel entrances all over. This, combined with the gravity of the plane allowing one to walk on any side, makes access to and from Harmonica easy. No one knows the purposes of Harmonica. Some possible origins people believe are that it is an amphitheater for demigods, simply artwork done on a stupendous scale, a place for invoking dark powers, or Pandemonium's physical heart that drives the winds throughout the plane. There are many rumors about how reaching the center can grant you great boons such as your fondest desires, immortality, or the secret to traveling the planes without portals or spells, and others say it curses you with lycanthropy, disintegration, disease, mutation, or having your soul torn to pieces and devoured by a dark power. Next up we have Hrugekalok, the divine realm of Hrugek, the primary god of bugbears. As divine realms go, this is a tiny one, and it's hidden away on the most unpopulated plane in existence. This is by design, as Hrugek, like most bugbears, is solitary, preferring caution and sneak attacks over direct confrontation. Hrugekalok is located in an unusually honeycombed area of Cocytus. The realm consists of bugbear villages situated on the edges of standing pools that have been magically heated so that grubs and other life can thrive in it, giving the petitioners food to hunt. The bugbear petitioners here were sufficiently merciless enough in life to qualify as Hrugek's servants. Far from the villages lie Hrugek's grotto, a foul cavern, although first edition says it is a fortress, filled with the bones of his victims and ringed by several heads of his conquered enemies. The heads have been cursed by Hrugek to, quote, howl perpetually with pleas for mercy and praises of Hrugek's might, end quote. The heads are of varied races, and they say they possess great power he can wield against other members of the head's race. Anyone who comes here who isn't a Hrugek-worshipping bugbear is either a potential slave or potential meat. The realm is filled with many traps to catch interlopers, which they believe to be spies of other gods. Such traps include deadfalls, pits, and ambushes. The hand-carved stone of Cocytus makes these traps extra difficult to spot, applying a minus 20% chance to find traps and a +2 to surprise rolls for ambushes. The chieftain of the largest village here, Stinking Glock, sells safe passage through the realm to parties of adventurers. However, he sometimes leads those same parties into traps. Sometimes the bugbears will hire themselves out as mercenaries to raid other layers or planes, but other than that, there are no services available to outsiders in Hrugekalok. The Shattered Castle, the divine realm of Cyric, the Faerunian deity of madness and lies. It was also called the Shattered Keep and the Castle of the Supreme Throne, although the latter was only used by Cyric himself. The Shattered Castle was originally a realm in Limbo created by the Batrachi, but Cyric moved it to Pandemonium and made it his new home after reading the Serenishad and fleeing his old realm, the Bone Castle in Hades. The Shattered Castle was described as a ruined castle that was twisting and ever-changing. The land around it, just like the rest of Pandemonium, was a barren realm of maddening winds. Last on Cocytus we have Battleguard, the divine realm of Garagos, the Faerunian god of barbaric and destructive war. It used to be located in Limbo, but after his loss in battle to Tempest, he became more merciless and quicker to anger, and felt that Limbo did not match his disposition anymore. So he moved Battleguard to Pandemonium. I could not find any descriptions of this realm though. Phlegethon, the third layer of Pandemonium. Phlegethon is a place of deep darkness and dripping water. It is darker here than any other layer of Pandemonium. Now, the other layers are pitch black all the time, so how could it be even darker here? Well, the walls here are ebon black and absorb light and heat radiation. So all sources of light, magical or not, have their radii reduced by half, and infravision ceases to function completely. The stone doesn't leach all heat, just radiated heat, so it's surprisingly not that cold to touch. Unlike the previous layers, gravity is only oriented one way on this layer. The ceiling constantly drips water, ensuring the plane is always wet with streams and rivers, and creating limestone columns, stalactites and stalagmites, and curtains of rock with a multitude of striations of colors. It's honestly a beautiful place, assuming you get close enough for your light to hit it. But it is home to the evil Unseelie Court, the realm of the fairy queen of air and darkness, and dangerous creatures such as blind albino cave wolves the size of buffalo, giant crayfish, monstrous slimes and puddings, and dragons. The first location of Cocytus we'll talk about is Windglum, a town whose founders were banished to Pandemonium so all of their descendants view all outsiders and the rest of the multiverse with disdain. It is located in one of the largest caverns of the plane, one several miles long and wide with huge natural columns holding it up. It is illuminated by hundreds of magical globes that float about the cave. In the middle of Windglum is the Citadel of Lords, the center of government here. The rest of the town radiates out from it, streets winding and crossing as they follow the natural rises and depressions of the cavern floor. People build buildings wherever they see fit, so there's no wards, districts, or any sort of organization to its layout. The cavern only has 5 entrances from the rest of the layer, and they are relatively small, making them easily defendable. They keep a large amount of guards at each one, since they're so suspicious of outsiders. They are closed with strong gates, and this, combined with the small size of the tunnels and the large size of the cavern, makes this one of the quietest and least windy places in the whole plane. The guards can act like a local police force, but that is rarely needed. The locals handle their own disagreements, usually without violence, and every adult is required to demonstrate proficiency with a weapon of their choice once a year. When the town was founded, each person brought a particular skill that was necessary for the town's survival and function. As time went on, each skill is now associated with a family, and this shapes how their society functions and how they view each other. As banished, they believe the rest of the universe looks down upon them, and they are determined to show them all up. Outsiders to the town tend to feel they are being given the cold shoulder. Conversations stop when they enter an inn, prices are higher for them, and people eye them suspiciously. You can buy almost anything here, but the prices are high. If you're an outsider, then any weapon you buy is reported to the guard, and you will be followed for a few days to make sure you don't cause trouble. While the town is fairly unwelcoming to outsiders, the one exception is the Scaly Dog Inn, which caters specifically to foreigners. The owner is part of the Banished, but he was fairly recently banished, so he hasn't built up hatred towards Outlanders yet, and he welcomes them with decent prices. The next location on Phlegethon is the Unseelie Court, the divine realm of the Queen of Air and Darkness. Now, if you're like me, who was originally only familiar with more recent lore, it's a little confusing because the Unseelie Court is located in the Feywild and the Queen of Air and Darkness isn't a goddess but an archfey. This is true as of 3rd edition and later, but in 2nd edition, the Feywild and archfey as we know them today didn't really exist. There were some vague references to the Land of Fairy, but it was never really fleshed out, and as far as I can tell, it wasn't this full-on mirror plane that it is today. Anyways, in 2nd edition, the Unseelie Court is located in Phlegethon, the 3rd layer of Pandemonium, and the Queen of Air and Darkness is considered a goddess. According to fairy legend, the Queen of Air and Darkness is the sister of Titania, the Queen of the Seelie Court. She was corrupted by a mystical black diamond, and now she hungers to spread this corruption through fairy kind. Those she has lured or enslaved to her realm are forced to spread this evil for her. Whereas the Seelie Court is a place of laughter, friendship, and loveliness, the Unseelie Court is a place of hatred, enslavement, and death. It is located deep within the layer, far from any common travel routes, inside a giant cavern hundreds of feet high with stalactites and stalagmites of black stone. In the center is the largest stalagmite with the black onyx throne of the Queen of Air and Darkness resting atop it. On the throne is the black diamond, the gem that corrupted her. The queen no longer maintains a physical form, instead her presence fills the entire realm, emanating from a cloud of blackness that hovers above the throne. All around, her petitioners and undead toil away at their appointed tasks, corrupting fairies, provisioning agents about to leave, creating magic items, and other dark missions. Yethhounds and Hellhounds are favorite servants of hers, and they prowl the outlying areas of the realm searching for intruders. The only thing that matters here, its only purpose and the only motivation for all actions, is to bring the Seelie Court under the sway of the Dark Queen's corruption. Any outsiders who stumble upon this realm are judged. If they prove to be a useful tool against the Seelie Court, the Queen of Air and Darkness enslaves them. If they are unfit, they are killed or used in magical experiments. Citadel of Slaughter, the divine realm of Erethnul, also called the Many, the Greyhawk deity of envy, malice, panic, ugliness, and slaughter. It is the crumbling ruin of a vast citadel that now only resembles a pile of rubble. The cold winds of the plane travel through its winding passages, carrying the sounds of eternal battle. Insane petitioners haunt the realm, wishing for nothing but to hunt and slay each other in cold blood. Arenthal sits in the middle of the pile slaying petitioners in human, gnoll, bugbear, ogre, or troll form. Every time he sheds blood, it turns into an allied creature of whatever form he was wearing. Hidden Betrayal. The divine realm of Dorinka, the patron god of the Darrow. It is hidden away on Phlegethon, with no visitors having ever returned to describe it. Despite this, it was said to be a chillingly dark place that endlessly drips with foul water. Ibrandalarin, the divine realm of Ibrandal, the Faerunian god of the Underdark, caverns, and dungeons. I could not find any more information on this place. Agathion, the fourth and final layer of Pandemonium. Pandemonium is the least populated plane, and its deepest layer is probably the least populated place in the entire multiverse. It is so inhospitable that no one goes here. No gods have realms here, no races call it home, and no Tanari covets it. Agathion is the deadliest layer of Pandemonium. Instead of caverns and tunnels, it consists of isolated pockets of air within the solid rock of the plane. Barriers from other layers open up into these bubbles, letting in the powerful winds. These winds swirl around in the spherical caverns, creating ever-present cyclones that can lift a creature that weighs up to a quarter ton, dealing 1d6 damage per round. Bubbles without a barrier to another layer are completely still and quiet. Half of these are filled with stale air and the other half vacuum. Since these have no entrances to them, they are incredibly difficult to find or go to. Some powers use them as vaults, hiding away precious mementos, powerful artifacts, or particularly fearsome monsters. Given the difficulty of getting to and leaving Agathion, there are no known locations that have been described or named. Now, even though I have gone through all the layers of Pandemonium, there are still a few locations to talk about that I haven't mentioned yet. This is because they either do not belong to any one layer, as is the case with Gorelick, or because the first edition monster manual did not state which layer they resided on, and I could not find a reference to them in any other material. So, since I'd mentioned Gorelick, let's start with him. Gorelick is the god of gnolls. Now, many of you probably know Yeenoghu as the main being that gnolls worship, but Yeenoghu is a demon lord who usurped the worship of gnolls from Gorelick. Now, his power significantly dwindled, Gorelick wanders Pandemonium with no permanent home. His realm is simply a 100-yard radius around himself, and any gnoll he encounters, unless they are a priest of another god, are instantly turned into hyenodons and join his pack. A hyenodon is essentially a giant hyena in terms of looks and behavior, although genetically it's actually not related to them at all and is instead a prehistoric creature that survived to current times. Next up we have Tuonela, the divine realm of Tuonatar and Tuoni, gods of the Finnish underworld. Tuonela is ringed by the river Manala, with water of crimson and black swells, which flows into the Styx. Anyone who drinks or touches it is drained of desire, so that they cannot fight, eat, or see purpose in life, wasting away and eventually dying. A successful saving throw negates this, as does Remove Curse. It is described as, quote, a grim realm of those living and dead who have drunk of the Manala's water, ruled from a great black house where Tuonatar and Tuoni live, occasionally hosting their many daughters, who include Kipatito of Tartarus and Loviatar of Gehenna, end quote. Next up, we have the realm of Anshar, the Babylonian god of dark and night, who once ruled the whole pantheon, but gave his power to Anu and Enlil when he retired. His estate is a great city between walls that run the entire circumference of its cave. It is topped by a great citadel whose tip reaches the center of the cavern itself. He is served by spirits of the most ancient type, dressed in archaic clothing and speaking tongues now dead and buried, but similar in description to Anu's warriors from Nirvana. I could not find a name for this divine realm. Next up, we have the divine realm of Karg, I don't know how you're supposed to say that, but he is the god of the Sartani, which are a race of crab-headed humanoids native to Jazeir Al-Sartan and Zakara's Crowded Sea. Very specific, I know, and I could not find a description of his realm, just that it was in Pandemonium. The last location of Pandemonium is the divine realm of Task, the Taker and the Holder, the draconic deity of greed and selfishness. It is described as a cave with the largest and richest treasure hoard in the universe, although the followers of Astilabor disagree with this. And that is all of the information I could find on Pandemonium. I have now done a video on every single lower plane, so if you want to know more about any other lower plane, make sure to check out my channel because there is a video on it and they are all as long and detailed as this one. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you liked it, please leave a like and remember to subscribe for more D&D related content.